My name is Dante Allen. I'm the Executive Director for CalABLE. That's California's Achieving a Better Life Experiences program. And I'm joined with my colleague, Steve Dale. Steve, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. A little introduction. I'm actually an attorney who focuses almost exclusively on special needs trusts and trust administration and that kind of thing and policy. I also am the trustee of the Golden State Pooled Trust. For a little background, I was a psych tech in a number of facilities, including 4 state hospitals, prior to becoming an attorney, and I'm also on the board of the ARC of California, and I am really excited about this presentation today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve. And let me just point out, I see that one of my colleagues at CalABLE is on the line too. Sandra Kent works with me in the CalABLE offices. And so what we thought we would do today is go to some of the very basics. We don't have a lot of time this afternoon, so we thought we would go over some of the basics of CalABLE. And then Steve and I have actually worked together quite a bit doing joint presentations where we talk about some of the ways to make the most out of using your ABLE account. So that's sort of how we've structured the conversation today. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A, not only at the end of today's presentation, but we also set up a, you want to describe it, Steve?
It's a meetup. And hopefully it's not attorney here and state director proof here, but we have a meetup here that Tori will talk about when we get to the end. So if you just didn't get enough, we've reserved 1 extra hour to answer your questions.
Yeah.
By the way, I should mention real quick, I am not with CalABLE. I'm a private attorney here, and Dante doesn't work for the Dale Law Firm, nor assisted endorsement for the Dale Law Firm.
Right, we are friends and colleagues in that we both serve similar communities and find that our work often overlaps. So it's my pleasure to present with Steve. So I'm going to get started with the presentation. Let me see if I can share my screen really quickly. Okay, you should see, and you can give me a thumbs up, Steve, if you see the CalABLE.
Oh, what you should do is hit presenter mode if you can, the little box on the bottom.
Oh yeah, I will do that.
Otherwise, it looks fine.
What's that?
Looking good.
Okay, so welcome to CalABLE. CalABLE is California's Achieving a Better Life Experiences program. I'll start with a little bit of background, and normally I can talk for about 1 hour and 15 minutes by myself just on CalABLE. So you are getting the abbreviated version today, so we can get into so we can delve into some of the deeper distinctions of using the program. But as I mentioned previously, ABLE stands for Achieving Better Life Experiences, and it was an act passed in 2014, signed into law by President Obama, and it was a new section added to the IRS tax code, Section 529A, and it is a subsection of Section 529, which allowed for college savings programs. This program, though, instead of allowing folks to save for higher educational expenses, this program allows you to save for disability-related living expenses. And so what the law did is it said that these states could create tax advantage savings and investment programs for the benefit of people with disabilities. And one of the great things about it is that with these special accounts, it won't affect your ability or your eligibility for means-tested benefit programs like SSI or Medi-Cal. Who's eligible to open these accounts? First and foremost, you must be an individual with a disability and that disability must have occurred before age 26. And so if you meet the eligibility criteria for disability benefits like SSI or SSDI, and you started those programs before your 26th birthday, you can automatically go and open up an ABLE account in any state that offers an ABLE account. But that's not to say that you must be a recipient of SSI or SSDI. There are many people who have not met that eligibility criteria previously, but still could qualify for an ABLE account. And so there's another pathway. If you either did not meet the SSI eligibility for benefits like SSI or SSDI before your 26th birthday, you can go through what is called a self-certification process. And this is when you attest under penalty of perjury that you are a person with a disability. The likely onset of that disability began before age 26, and it is a physical or mental impairment that is expected to last a year or longer. At CalABLE, California's ABLE program, we ask that you get a letter from your physician that says that, yes, you have a disability. Yes, it likely began before your 26th birthday. And yes, it's expected to last a year or longer. We don't ask you to turn that into us. We just want you to hold on to it because you may be asked about it in the future. And there may be a few people that would ask for it in the future, whether it was the IRS during the time of an audit, or maybe by Social Security if you were going through a benefits recertification process. And so, and just in case you're curious, we use the same definitions for disability that the Social Security Administration uses. If you're familiar with the Blue Book or the list of compassionate allowances, we go by those very same definitions of disability. And so that can include things like mobility impairments, visual or hearing loss, mental health conditions would all qualify for ABLE eligibility. So what can you do with an ABLE account? The first thing is that you have the ability to save in an ABLE account above those resource limits that have been set for programs like SSI. If you receive SSI, you've probably been told the entire time that you've been receiving the benefit that if you ever save more than $2,000 in a bank account, you're running into jeopardy of having your benefits suspended. You'll get a letter from the Social Security Administration that says, hey, you need to do this spend down and get below $2,000. And if you don't do it within the time frame that we set, we're going to help you out by suspending your benefit. So you have to live on whatever that additional money that you have until you get that below $2,000. And then your benefits would be reinstated. But now with an ABLE account, you have the ability to save up to $15,000 a year and up to $100,000 in total without your SSI being impacted at all. And I know that the question that is typically asked is, well, if somebody's living off of SSI, which is somewhere around $1,000 a month, how could they possibly save up to $15,000 a year or even $100,000 in total? And the other great thing about the ABLE program is that anyone can contribute to these accounts. And so if you're someone other than the beneficiary, the person with the disability, those are considered as gifts. They don't count against your income. They're not counted as income or your resources as long as they're placed in an ABLE account. So other folks can contribute. Anyone can contribute. And CalABLE will automatically reject excess contributions. So if you try to put in more than that $15,000 that you're entitled to, or even as you get close to that $100,000 limit, will inform you that once you get up above that $100,000, your benefits are going to be in jeopardy the same way they were at $2,000. And then the other thing that you should know is if you're not worried about losing your benefits at all, the total contribution limit for a CalABLE account is $529,000. And even at that $529,000, your account can still continue to grow. You're just not allowed to put in any additional contributions as long as you're up above that 529. There are a select few that can actually contribute more than the $15,000 per year into their ABLE account, but it must be an individual who is working and is not contributing to an employer-based retirement program. And this was done as part of 2017's tax reform, where it was a special component that said that if you don't have a retirement program, we can set up something special for you to use your ABLE account in a way similar to a retirement program. But so if you are one of those folks that can participate, you can put in a portion of your income, an amount equal to your annual gross salary or the federal poverty level for the preceding year of your saving. So in 2020, the federal poverty level that you could contribute is $12,490. So depending on your salary or that $12,490, whichever is less, you have the potential to put in up to $27,490 into an ABLE account in a single year. And so qualified disability expenses is the phrase that we use that talks about when you pull money out of an ABLE account, you still receive those tax advantage benefits as long as you're spending that money on qualified disability expenses. And the definition of what constitutes a qualified disability expense is any expense related to the designated beneficiary as a result of living a life with disabilities that helps to maintain or improve your health, your independence, or your quality of life. Now, this is a very broad definition, and it's actually done that way purposefully. These accounts are made to be very usable. So there are not a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. We do recommend that you keep a record. So whenever you're withdrawing money from your ABLE account, you should be at the very least keeping receipts and notes on the money that you withdraw and what you purchase in case you're ever asked. And now this is another case where CalABLE will never ask you, well, is what you're withdrawing for a qualified disability expense? We don't track that. We don't ask that. It's the money in the account belongs to that beneficiary, and so it can be used for whatever reason. But we do recommend that you keep good notes because you may be asked in the future. And the same folks that would have asked you for that doctor's letter, either the IRS or the Social Security Administration, they may be asking, okay, you're using your ABLE account. Let's verify that you're using it for things that are qualified disability expenses. And so the main thing that you should know is if it improves your health, independence, or quality of life, it is generally a qualified disability expense, and it won't jeopardize your benefits. You won't be taxed in any way for using your ABLE funds for this reason. Okay, so here's a few more examples of qualified disability expenses. You can use them to pay for things like education, housing expenses, transportation, employment or training and support, prevention and wellness, financial management and administrative services, basic living expenses, including food, funeral and burial expenses, and anything related to your health. The one thing that you should know is that with housing related expenses, the withdrawal from the ABLE account and the payment of that housing expense need to occur within the same calendar month. If not, you jeopardize yourself by having anything that you pull out of that account count against you as a resource against those benefits. But that only applies when it's directly related to housing. It must be taken out and spent within the same calendar month. CalABLE is a savings and investment program, and we actually offer 4 portfolios where you can place your money once it's already in the account. And these pie charts are an example of those different portfolios. So we have the FDIC insured portfolio, which operates very similarly to a checking or a savings account. It's not attached to the larger markets, and so your money will not go up and down as the markets go up and down. It's 100% an interest-bearing account. But we also have 3 target risk investment portfolios, a conservative, a moderate, and aggressive growth portfolios. And they are divided a little differently. So for the conservative portfolio, it is 55% bonds, 20% stock, and 25% funding option. And that funding option is a life insurance product that's managed by Tia Kreff, our program administrator. And it's similar in a way to the FDIC insured portfolio, where it gives you an interest rate return, not directly attached to the markets, actually gives a higher rate than those FDIC insured portfolios. But this is a relatively safer bet, meaning that your investments aren't going to fluctuate as greatly as they would if you were in one of the more aggressive portfolios. So your money could grow. You could also lose money. It won't happen very quickly. With our moderate portfolio, it's 45% bonds, another 40% or actually 50% stocks, and 5% funding agreement. So again, because there's more variability with the stock market, it will have more regular fluctuations than the conservative portfolio. And then the aggressive is almost entirely stock. It's 80% stock, 20% bonds. And so you have, again, an opportunity to grow your money really fast, but you need to watch it, because as the market goes, so does that aggressive portfolio. This is a very quick illustration of the fees associated with a CalABLE account. This is assuming that you have $3,000 in an ABLE account. If you choose only that FDIC insured portfolio, the most it would cost you for an entire year of operating your account is $37. But you do have the ability to vary it up. You can put some of your money in the FDIC insured portfolio, and then you can evenly divide however you like across the other portfolios. And so if you do that, in addition to the $37 per year, you would be charged an additional $2.40 to $2.70 as an underlying investment fee, and then an additional $13.20 as a state administrative fee. So the maximum that it would cost you for a year of operating your CalABLE account with a $3,000 balance is $52.90. So a relatively inexpensive way to save and potentially grow your money. I do need to add that if you elect to receive your quarterly statements by the U.S. Postal Service, there's a $10 per year charge. But if you elect to receive those statements by email, that fee is waived in its entirety. ABLE accounts, you may have heard in the past that if you have an ABLE account and when that beneficiary or the person with the disability passes away, that Medicaid can go in and reimburse itself for any of the health care that they've paid for over the course of the beneficiary's lifetime. Well, here in California, we've passed a couple of laws that protect ABLE accounts. The first is AB 688, which protects ABLE accounts from being tapped into from the enforcement of monetary judgments. So if you're ever sued or you have a major debt to a creditor, they can't involuntarily go into your ABLE account in order to satisfy those debts. The second is we passed a law that said that Medi-Cal will not file a claim directly on the ABLE account. So if you're a Californian with a CalABLE account, Medi-Cal won't seek that recovery. And so for both of these, the protection applies only to California residents who are living in California. So what happens when an account owner passes away? The first thing is that any outstanding qualified disability expenses may be paid using ABLE funds. The account would then be transferred into the deceased individual's estate. And if that estate is required to go through probate, meaning that the entire value of the estate is worth $150,000 or more, there may be a second opportunity for Medi-Cal to seek recovery, not from the ABLE account, but from the deceased individual's estate. But they've clarified for us when are the circumstances that they would do that. And so these 4 bullet points down below, all of these things have to apply in order for them to attempt any kind of Medi-Cal recovery. And the first element is the deceased individual had to be age 55 or older when they passed away. And they had to be a user of those extensive Medicaid services like in-home support, skilled nursing, even prescription drug medications. I already mentioned that the estate would have to go through probate, meaning that the entire value of the estate is worth $150,000 or more. And the deceased individual is not survived by a spouse, a child under the age of 18, or a child with a disability of any age. If any of those apply, then Medi-Cal would not attempt to recover from the estate of a deceased individual. So if you've heard that as one of the reasons why you shouldn't open an ABLE account, I would encourage you to seriously rethink that, because we've done a lot of work to make sure that that's not a problem. If you need help with enrollment, and most of the interaction with CalABLE occurs online, but if you need help with anything, please feel free to call our customer call center. The number there is 833-CalABLE or 833-225-2253. And they're available Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can connect with us across social media. We're all over the place. And here's the fine print. And it just asks you to consider that there is risk involved with CalABLE. Like any other investment product, there is a potential that you could lose money. And so you should be aware of what that level of risk is before joining any program. Now, again, I said that this is the quick version, but I do want to open this up for a good dialogue, but I will turn things over to my colleague, Steve Dale, before we move into that place.
Great. And as I get this switched over, by the way, as Dante was talking about the lane upon death and that kind of thing, almost any estate planning attorney can show you how to avoid the lien within those rules. So that's something that's easily avoided. By the way, you can hear me okay, I hope?
We can.
Okay, and I'm just trying to bring up my PowerPoint. I'm sorry. For whatever reason, and this is just taking a moment. I'm sorry, I'm trying to bring up my PowerPoint and I'm having a problem. Let me mention this as we go through this, and hopefully I can do this as I'm trying to.
I can bring it up also on this side if you like.
Would you? That would be great.
One moment. Okay, can you see it now?
No, I actually, oh, there it is. Let me open it up.
I can see it.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay. So anyway, part of this is I'm presenting this basically as an attorney who does a lot of work with special needs trusts here, and also as the trustee of a pooled trust. And Tori, am I controlling this or you're my mouse?
I'm your mouse.
Okay, Tori, let's go to the next one.
Alrighty.
Okay, this will be a challenge. Okay, and by the way, this is fascinating information you guys can go over later. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so as I like to say, this is about how I learned to stop worrying and learned to love the ABLE Act. I want to tell you, especially for those of professionals out there, attorneys, trustees, or whatever, this is something that really is a real boon to your clients, and this is something you should embrace. So as an attorney who's been focusing on persons with disabilities and their families here to administer and set up special needs trust accounts, I love the ABLE account for these reasons. So let's go through them. Next. Okay, first off, it gives greater freedom and control over expenditures for a lot of the folks I work with. One thing about special needs trust here is that the trustee has to have sole and absolute discretion over every single distribution. Now, as the trustee of the Golden State Pool Trust, when I'm not using the CalABLE account, I have to go over every single receipt. That includes what kind of feminine hygiene product you're using. If you're a woman, what do you use your money? Things that are normally none of my business, nor do I really want to know. Here with a CalABLE account, as we're going to talk about, there's a lot greater freedom and control over expenses. Okay. Secondly, an SSI recipient can use a CalABLE account, and I'm going to dig into this really deeply, as a tool for food and shelter, and to avoid up to a $3,372 a year reduction in their benefits. Now, that's a sizable chunk of change when you have folks trying to live on $943.72 in California. Next one, Tori. Section 8 recipients, okay, all the HUD programs, if you have the expenditures run through a CalABLE account, they are absolutely not counted as income. And one thing that Dante and ABLE advocates have is a letter from HUD basically explaining this. So if you have a housing authority that just really is not aware of this, we got the documentation. Next one, Tori. Expenditures from a CalABLE account are given less scrutiny than expenditures that are made directly from a special needs trust. Part of this is the folks who set this up were brilliant. They set this up under the Department of Treasury, and believe it or not, the Department of Treasury has a long history, long before ABLE, of being very disability friendly. Social Security, not so much. Okay, so also, expenditures can be great tools for persons with disabilities who work to avoid being over-resourced. Now, I put something in the chat box but for those of you here who have a loved one, and by the way, in many cases, the road to true independence is working. This is a great tool, and there's a website called disabilitybenefits10.1.org or db10.1.org, which is a great resource for explaining this and that sort of thing. Next one. Okay, and the other part of this, as I'm going to go through, is it's a great tool to teach financial literacy. I'll give you an example right now. I opened up an ABLE account for my niece who has Down syndrome, who's never managed money in her life. Always assumed that, and she's always been on SSI. We have used an ABLE account to teach her how to actually make expenditures. Now, I'll tell you, the first expenditures were absolutely laughable, but as time went on, she has gotten better and better and better. How are you going to learn how to manage money, how to budget and that kind of thing if you've never actually done it? It's a great tool to do that. Next slide. So here's an example, and hit it again. So I want to just reiterate this, and Tori hit it one more time here. As Dante went through, you have to be found to be disabled before the age of 26, okay? Here, and you can do that either by getting benefits themselves or going through a certification process. Now, I have a lot of folks in the behavioral health community who say, well, this isn't for me, because it's very common that maybe somebody didn't get their benefits until their late 20s or 30s, or I had somebody recently with that didn't get them until the 40s. Here, but as we all know, it is very rare that the genesis of a behavioral health situation didn't start well before the age of 26. Next slide. So, for instance, with schizophrenia, it is rarely true that it didn't at least begin before the age of 25, and the average is between 18 and 25. Now, I'll tell you, for myself, I have helped many folks with a mental health diagnosis get their ABLE account, because it's real easy. Here, as Dante talked about, you need to be able to have that letter. They're not even going to ask for the letter, but you need to have it. The only time we failed was with a physician who was absolutely convinced the only thing we were going to use that for is to help them in a disability determination. And the law itself says you cannot use it for a disability determination. You can only use it to get your CalABLE account. So once again, that's one reason why this is so underutilized by this population, is this misunderstanding that this is not for folks with mental health diagnosis. Next slide. Now, who can manage and just hit it about 3 times. One more. Okay. Now, as Dante went through, and as often happens in the middle of a presentation, the folks who make the rules add to the rules here, but basically the folks who can set up an account and manage the account is either the person with the disability themselves, an eligible individual's agent under a power of attorney, or their parents, or their legal guardian or conservator. What was just added was also here a rep payee here that's been put in place by the Social Security Administration. Okay, and so who can establish and manage it is really something really important. Tori, next slide, please. Okay. And once again, and this is really key, we're going to see that in a minute, unless the ABLE beneficiary lacks capacity. So you could be challenged. That doesn't mean you don't have capacity. They have the first priority to manage the account regardless of who established the account here. So to determine whether this is right for you, if an ABLE beneficiary has capacity to manage his or her account, have them establish a power of attorney right away. And this would also be, maybe you have a situation where you have somebody who sets this up, but they really want their sister to help them, okay? here, and you would do it through a power of attorney. Okay, if the designated beneficiary lacks the capacity to manage the account, then you need to put a little bit of thought into this, okay? And this doesn't mean that CalABLE is not for you. You just need, it's like every tool, you need to understand it and put a little thought into it. Next slide. Oh, next slide. Okay, so just keep going. So unless the able beneficiary lacks capacity, they have the right to control the trust. And if that's a concern, then consider feeding the account either privately or through a special needs trust. I'll give you an example. My niece, once again, we have it tied to a special needs trust. Now, and we're working on her financial literacy. We're working on teaching her how to use it. She is, like many situations, she is exceeding our expectations. So she's doing things we never thought she would be able to do before. And so as she's getting better and better at it, we're feeding it with more and more money. If you have a situation where you're concerned, or if you have a situation where you're contributing to an ABLE account, let's say somebody has a bipolar disorder and has wild mood swings, well, then use what I call the money in, money out procedure, which is feed it with enough money so that your loved one will have the ability to make expenditures and use it, but don't put in so much that you would be very concerned if they were to have a mood swing and maybe do something that you wouldn't want them to do. Once again, still is a great tool. So using an ABLE account with a special needs trust. And so, okay, and Tori, next slide. Now what this is, just to explain it, and Dante already gave you an example of a POM site when he was talking about what is a QDE. My question always is, when you call Social Security, does it seem like they're reading a script? They're reading a script, and it's the script is from something called the Program Operation Manual System here, and this is where the rules are. What I'm going to go through very quickly here is a couple of the POMs on ABLE Act, just to illustrate a couple of things. Next slide, Tori. So, and these numbers, these are blocked and copied straight out of the POMs. So, a transfer of funds from a trust that's a beneficiary, that's of which the designated beneficiary of the ABLE account is the beneficiary, and it's not considered a resource to her, to him or her, to the beneficiary's ABLE account, and will be considered a third-party contribution. This is basically telling us that you can tie in an ABLE account with a special needs trust. Next slide. So this POMS, this one is really valuable. This is basically telling the eligibility workers, do not count distributions from an ABLE account as income of the designated beneficiary, regardless of whether the contributions are for a QDE, a qualified disability expense, not related to housing, for a housing expense, or non-qualified expense. What is this telling us? This is telling the Social Security worker, keep your bloody little hands off of this account and do not go through it and scrutinize it. This is managed under the Department of Treasury, okay? So one of the advantages of this is not that we want to see people take advantage of Social Security, wouldn't that be awful here, but the thing about it is there's less chance of this going through lots of scrutiny and lots of questions, and it's a much safer way to go. If you're administering a special needs trust, and let's say the beneficiary has a hard time keeping up their receipts, and when you have an audit of a special needs trust, they do ask for receipts. If what happened is the money went into the ABLE account and the ABLE account paid for the expenditures, Social Security is being told to keep your bloody little hands off of this account and don't review it. This is huge because, once again, these rules can be very complicated. Next slide. CalABLE and housing. Now, this is one, if I could figure out a way, because for some of you watching this, I'm going to show you a way to save more than $3,000 a year. Now, I wish there was a way that I could charge you 20% for this because I am an attorney, but there's no way of doing this. So this is just free legal advice. There's three kinds of income here when you're dealing with Social Security. One is if you give somebody cash directly, they're going to lose their benefits dollar for dollar. If they earn it, they'll lose $1 for every $2 they earn after the first $65. Although let me mention, you still have the $2,000 resource rule, and this is where the Able to Work programs are so valuable. This is the one that's most perplexing. Okay, Social Security, SSI, is for food, clothing we don't count any longer, and shelter. And if they are unable to pay for their shelter, and if they get assistance, whether it's from a family member, a trust, or wherever they get it, their benefits will be reduced dollar for the value of the assistance up to $281 a month. Now, if that isn't the stupidest rule in the world, I don't know what is, but those are the rules and whatever. But CalABLE comes in and saves the day, and let's go through and see why. Next slide. So as Dante went through, the interpretation of what a QDE is pretty liberal. But when you're looking at what is considered housing for SSI, it's these 9 things. It's actually 10 things. It includes food. And there was recently a directive that came down that says, yes, you can feed somebody on a CalABLE account and it won't reduce their benefits. So these are the 9 things. Add food, you got 10 that they look at. Let's see how this plays out. Next slide. So let's say Belinda has been disabled from birth here, and she's getting $931.72 a month in SSI. She's a beneficiary of a special needs trust. Doesn't matter what kind of special needs trust it is. She'd like to move to a nicer apartment that would cost $1,000 a month. Now, that's going to be really hard to do on $931.72. So she's going to need some assistance in order to make the move. Next slide. So if Bob, her trustee, were to give her $1,000 a month, that's not going to work because that's unearned income, and that's just going to wipe out her SSI completely. If Bob were to pay the landlord directly, which is what we've always had to do, the payments would be counted as what's called in-kind support and maintenance, and her benefits would be reduced by $281 a month. Now, that's what we've always done in the past, and we've basically said, well, that's the best we could do. But CalABLE introduces something completely new. If instead Bob were to contribute $1,000 a month to her CalABLE account, and in turn the funds were from the account were to use to pay the landlord, then there would be no reduction in SSI. Now, let me mention a couple of things before we go to the next slide. Why is that so? It's because the instant the money hits that account, it belonged to Belinda. So Belinda is paying her own rent with her own money. That's why that works. Also, this example is with Bob, the trustee, but Bob could be the brother. Bob could be the parent. You know, it doesn't really make much difference where the money comes in. In this example, I'm saying $1,000 a month, but you know, you could put in $12,000 to $15,000 a year, which would make the whole thing a lot easier. But if you look at this, because the ABLE account instantly turns it into Belinda's money, if you run the money, as my wife likes to say, Dante can't say this, but I can, is that we're actually laundering the money through the CalABLE account here. And by doing that, and we're laundering it right out in the open, we're changing the money from somebody else's money to Belinda's money for a savings of $3,000 and change. That is a chunk of change for somebody on SSI. Anyway, next slide. Now, I'm going to, because of time, because we do want to leave some time for questions, I'm just going to cover 1 or 2 of these slides, and the rest you can go through this. So, Tori, if you could just go through this. Housing for all people with, well, all Californians, let's face it, disabled or not, all Californians, housing is a challenge. For folks with disability, it's a huge challenge. We're getting more and more families that are setting up houses in special needs trusts, if you can afford to do that. Because I will say, where will my child live is probably one of the greatest issues we deal with, second to nothing. What this example is going to talk about, and let's go to the next slide, is putting a house in a special needs trust, holding the house in the trust, and how we can do that to protect the house if something happens in this case here, but still making sure that our disabled loved one has a place to live and can also maximize their benefits. Now, what this is saying under the palms, and when you come back to this, if you take that site, if you take SIO 1120.200 and Google it, my website will probably come up pretty quickly, but after that, it'll come the site to the Social Security. And what you'd want to do here is take this and copy it if you're going to use this. Basically, what this is saying is that if the trustee of a special needs trust holds title to the house, so let's say you set up a special needs trust and it's holding a house that your loved one's going to live with, it's not considered a resource. Next slide. It's also under Social Security going to be treated as if it belongs to the SSI recipient under a concept called equitable ownership. I won't go through it, but basically what they're saying is even though she doesn't own it, we're going to treat it as if she owns it. Next slide. So, next slide. We'll go through a bunch of these. So what that means is that in this case, she doesn't have to pay rent to the trust because she has equitable ownership. But what if our recipient likes electricity and water and food? Well, if the trust were to pay those expenses, we're going to have our $281 reduction in benefits. Next slide. So she can live in the house rent-free because she has an equitable ownership, but once again, she may like food. And let's go further here. Next slide. So Sue can transfer the money into the CalABLE account while she's alive. She could do it through the trust or do it herself here to make sure that that money goes into the account, and then that could be used to pay the property taxes, the electricity, and that sort of thing. And as long as the ABLE account pays those items, there won't be a reduction in in Mia's SSI because Mia is paying for her shelter expenses with her own money because we ran it through a CalABLE account. Why don't we take this to the end here, Tori, so we can leave some time for questions here. So a couple things real quick. What do I like about the ABLE account? It really expands options for persons with disabilities here. I like that there's less scrutiny. The housing thing is so important. You know, personally, I think as long as you understand the moving parts of this, you may have somebody that you're using this for here where there may be some challenges where you may want to look at how you use it. But I found very few situations where this wasn't a tool. And I think that's also important. ABLE accounts are neither good nor are they evil. Special needs trusts are neither good nor are they able. They are only tools here. For me, a lot of the folks I'm working with, they're getting both a special needs trust and an ABLE account. What's right for your loved one? It really depends on the situation. With that, we will go to the most terrifying part of the presentation. Are there any questions?
I'm going to stop the share here so that I can see the question box for everyone.
Okay. The other thing, let me mention, birthdays, Christmas, that sort of thing. You know, it's really common that a lot of folks will like give an SSI recipient money under the table because you're not supposed to give them cash. An ABLE account is a great way of setting this up where you can, pass this on to your loved one with a disability who's on SSI, Medi-Cal, and that kind of thing, and do it right out in the open. So, I mean, there are so many uses of this thing. The other thing I'll mention, and then I'll do something hard for me, I'll be quiet, is that I think this is so misunderstood by the behavioral health community. I would really urge chapters here to really learn more about this tool. Yeah, you need to look at the challenges as well, but really how this can really help persons with disabilities, including folks with mental health diagnoses here to live a better quality of life.
Yeah.
Tori, what do we got going here?
So there are some questions in the chat box, and I'm pushing some more through. Are you guys able to see those questions on your side?
Yes, I can see them. And there's one that I'd like to answer. It is, can the funds be mingled in one account with, say, the beneficiary's deposits and also their parents, or do you have to have two separate accounts? And so that question actually gets to a lot of things that that are fundamentals of ABLE and things that are sort of in the planning phases of change at ABLE. The first thing that you should know with that question is that each ABLE beneficiary, a person with a disability, is only allowed to have one ABLE account. You can't have multiple ABLE accounts, even if, let's say, mom opened one and dad opened another. If it's for the benefit of the same beneficiary, you're only allowed to have one ABLE account at a time. You can do what's called a rollover, where you close an account in one state and open another in another state, but you can't have two. And so, but you can commingle the funds in an ABLE account. You can have first-party contributions, which comes from the beneficiary's own money and going into their ABLE account. You can have third-party contributions, which come from family and friends and loved ones and churches, etc. And you don't have to make a distinction about where the money comes from in those particular cases. You just have to remember that you're limited to the $15,000 per year contribution limit unless you're one of those folks that can actually contribute more. The other thing, I mentioned that there are some things that are changing, and it's related to, and even though ABLE has been around for 5 years now, we're actually just now receiving the final regulations to guide ABLE. And so they've come up with a few new rules that may be different than things that you've heard if you've participated in previous ABLE discussions. One of the main ones is who can serve as the authorized legal representative of an ABLE account. Previously, you either had to be a parent, a guardian, or a conservator, or someone with legal power of attorney over the beneficiary. And they've expanded that definition now that it can include folks like representative payees. It can include siblings and other relatives, or it can be anyone that the beneficiary chooses, as long as they're willing to say that anyone from those higher categories is either unwilling or unavailable to participate. Another thing that's changing, and this is directly related to your question, is the idea of separate or sub-accounts. So these final regulations that just came out in the last week or so said that you now have the ability to create sub-accounts inside the ABLE account that could even be managed by someone else. So say you as a parent set up an ABLE account for your child, and you don't want to give them access to all of the account. you can set up a sub account where they would have direct control over. That's a service that we already have, very similar with our prepaid debit card, where you can load money onto the debit card, give that debit card to the beneficiary, and then they can use that money. It's not directly linked to the rest of the money that's in the ABLE account. So it could serve as sort of a training wheels proposition for folks. But that was a very good question. So thank you for asking.
I'll grab one right here. And this is one thing where, once again, I think simplicity and disability are two words that just don't go together. Emily here says an attorney told us that we could give our 45-year-old son who is on SSDI, not SSI, SSDI, as much as we want with no reduction in monthly assistance. And the answer is absolutely true. Now, if you're getting SSDI, you should eventually be getting Medicare 2 years after qualifying for that. It will not interfere with the Medicare. If you are getting Medi-Cal on top of that, for instance, to pay the copay or to pay for attendant care, that would be subject to a reduction. So it really is important to understand what benefits you're on here. Still, even on SSDI, this could be a great savings plan. But once again, you need to look at the programs that you're on. Dante, also, there's a series of questions, maybe you can cover this in one, dealing with checking accounts through CalABLE and debit cards. What do you got?
So CalABLE does offer that optional prepaid debit card. It's not like your, it's not like a commercial bank debit card. And the first thing is you can't use it at an ATM to access money. The other thing is that the money has to be loaded or reloaded onto the card. It's not directly linked to your ABLE account. You can move it directly from your ABLE account onto the card, but only the amount that you put on the card is available on the card. And you can have a card for the authorized legal representative and for the beneficiary. And so you can, the way that you deposit or withdraw money from your ABLE account can be done in a few ways. You can send in checks by the mail. You can request that checks be cut for you, although there is a fee related to that. Or you can link your standard checking or savings account to your CalABLE account, and then you can do electronic transfers between the two. So if you needed to have a regular deposit going into your ABLE account, you can set that up through your commercial bank and have that deposit regularly go into the ABLE account. And you can pull the money out whenever you need to as well.
Now, I should mention, I think Tori is going to tell us more in a bit. We do have a meetup after this for those of you who want more, but let's see if we can answer a few more questions. Could I ask if CalABLE is just for people, can it be used for folks with physical disabilities? Could it be used for somebody with a developmental disability? Dante, do you care what kind of disability they have?
We don't. We don't. And one of the elements of the new regulation said, you know, ABLE programs don't have the ability to discriminate based on what type of disability that folks have. I can say that more often than not, the parents of individuals with developmental or intellectual disabilities have fully embraced ABLE a lot faster than the larger disability community. But we have folks of all disability types that are opening their ABLE account. And the reality is, when compared to non-disabled, able-bodied folks, a person with a disability's life is just a little bit more expensive. There are lots of other things that we need to do to take care of ourselves.
And I do want to answer something before Tori cuts us off, because we are running out of time here. But there was one of the questions about running an allowance through a PayPal account. There you truly are laundering money. So here's the thing. It doesn't matter whether it goes through a PayPal account or what it goes through. If you are giving cash to an SSI or a Medi-Cal recipient who's getting Medi-Cal based on disability, that is income. Maybe you won't get caught, but it's still income. But here's the cool thing. We've got this tool here where you could run the funds through an ABLE account, and it's absolutely legal here. So really, why go through the chance of basically being caught for fraud? I mean, there's not a nicer term to put it here, when we have an easy way of doing this. And I don't mean that in a judgmental sense. The fact is, just imagine, for those of us that are not on SSI, imagine living on $943.72 a month. I mean, it boggles my mind how many of you that are watching this do that. You know, once again, this is a way to assist our loved ones with a disability and try to get closer to living a quality of life that many of us take for granted.
Here's one that is directly to our subject, Steve. Do people who have a special needs trust set up, and then part of the way the trust is worded, have an ABLE account set up with money from the trust, so after your parents pass away, the ABLE account would become activated? And the simple answer is yes, they very much do that. The ABLE account is always activated from the moment you open it, but you can have it set up where the individual can start withdrawing money when needed to pay for life experiences after the beneficiary passes away, or after the parents pass away. And then, are there limits to how many deposits you can make into a CalABLE account? No, there are no limits. You can, the only limit is you have an annual contribution limit. And then if you get your money all the way up to that $529,000, you can't continue to contribute after that. Your account, because it is an investment account, can continue to grow. You just won't be able to put in any more money into the account.